The story begins on Jeju Island with a little girl desperately calling for her mother. Her name is Esun, a very smart girl but with a very bad temper. Next to her was little Wansik, a boy who is hopelessly in love with her. Everyone in the village notices except Esun. When her mother comes out, we discover that she also has a very bad temper, but that's because she has had a very hard life. She is a traditional woman diver who collects bulon from the bottom of the sea. Besides Esun, she has 2 other children with a man who doesn't work. She is the only breadwinner in her household, and that's why she has to work very hard. Esun's father had died when she was very young, and that's why she sent her to her late husband's family. But they were very mean to her. Her uncle wouldn't give her any fish because she was very smart and always outshined his son. Even knowing this, her mother always sent her back. This made her look like the bad one in the community. But she did all that because she wanted her daughter to have a better future. Her ex-husband's family had more money and could send Esun to school. She thought that at least with them she would have a chance. But that day, things would change because her mother read the poem that Esun had written for her. When she finished, with tears in her eyes, she went to her mother-in-law's house to give them a lot of fish. This was as payment for having taken care of her daughter for so many years. But from now on, she would no longer live with them. Esun was very happy because she would finally live with her mother. A few days later, the girl was crying because she had won the election to be the class president. But the teacher gave the position to another child. When her mother found out, she worked very hard in her friend's field and managed to borrow her pearl necklace. With it, she dressed up nicely and went to the school to confront the teacher. She wanted to pretend to be Esun's rich aunt, so she gave him some food and a lot of money so that he would no longer look down on her for being poor. When leaving the school, Esun promises his mother that he will be very successful. He only asks her to wait a little, and he will buy her a pearl necklace like the one her friend lent her. Also, since she wasn't the group leader, she promises to become the first female leader of the village. The years went by like this, until one day Esun's mother fell ill. The women divers didn't live long. Because of how dangerous their profession was, they lived shorter lives than most people. When she found out, the girl was furious, so she started complaining to the sea god for wanting to take her mother away before she could fulfill her promise. When she gets tired of crying, Wansik arrives and offers her some food because he knows that crying makes her very hungry. At night, Esun's mother goes to see her mother-in-law and then takes her daughter to say goodbye to her. She prepares her favorite food and asks her that when she dies, she should go back to her grandmother's house and not stay to take care of her siblings. Esun tells her that's not smart and asks her not to die. A few days later, her mother passes away at the age of 29, so she wants to do what she asked. But her stepfather convinces her to stay with her siblings for a while until she can save up money and support them. But this kept happening over and over again. Her stepfather always had a new excuse. Years went by like this, and the only one who stayed with her was Wansik. Until one day, Esun got tired and wanted to go to her grandmother's house. But her stepfather promised her that he would go to Seoul to make a lot of money. And with what he earns, not only will he be able to support her siblings, but he will also be able to send her to college so she can study literature. So again, the years went by and Esun became a beautiful young woman. Wansik still followed her around. He was so in love that he did everything for her. Because of that, her mother and grandmother hated Esun, especially her grandmother, who always went after her whenever she could, saying that her mother's spirit was with her. His grandmother was a shaman and said that being haunted brought bad luck. Later, both of them are seen at the seashore. Esun tells him that she will never marry him because she will leave the island and marry a man from Seoul. This upsets Esun and she doesn't say anything the whole way. But Esun gets even more upset and tells him to stop looking at her with pity. She thinks that all these years he has been following her only because he feels sorry for her. But Wansik gathers his courage and gives her their first kiss. Instead of getting angry, Esun tells him that he took too long because she had always been waiting for that. Then they share another passionate kiss. When Esun gets home, she's very happy. But her happiness fades when she sees her stepfather with another woman. Disappointed, she goes back to her grandmother's house to ask for help. But her uncle didn't want to take her in, so she returns to her stepfather. She went to ask her stepfather for the money he had promised her so she could leave as soon as possible and go to college. But his new wife tells her no, because now they're expecting another child and he'll need a lot of money to support the baby. But things get even more complicated because later her uncle calls her. He had gotten her a job at a factory in Seoul and shamelessly asks her to send him half of her salary because his son has a debt. And the eldest grandson's debt is the debt of the whole family. Disappointed, once again, she goes to Wansik and tells him everything that's happening to her. When he hears this, he starts reciting a poem and tells her that he wants to be with her, although he admits that things won't be easy at all. She asks him to at least lie to her, to promise her that he'll give her the moon and the stars. Wansik replies that he doesn't want to deceive her. Days later, the jewels from Wansik's family are stolen and they escape together to Busan on the ship. The captain asks them for their identification because since they are minors, they couldn't leave the island alone. Esun tells him that they are not minors and that if they don't believe them, they can throw them overboard. The captain gets scared and leaves them alone. When they arrive in the city, they try to sell the jewels, but the vendor doesn't accept them because they had no way to prove the jewels were theirs. They go to a hotel and tell the owner they lost their documents. She reassures them, saying not to worry because Busan is known for its hospitality. In the room, Esun asks Wansik to explain to his grandmother what he feels, and he replies that his grandmother wouldn't understand and he's afraid that she might do something to her. Upon hearing this, Esun replies that that's why she chose him, because she knows he would never do anything to break her heart. Later, when they were about to sleep, Esun asks if they can sleep together because in Busan, they are husband and wife, but before going to bed, the owner of the hotel arrives and kindly offers them drinks and something to eat, and tells them that everything is on the house. Also, she knows it's their first night together, so they should enjoy it as much as they can. The next day, they both wake up very happy, but the kind lady from the hotel had completely changed because she charged them for all the food she gave them. And also, their suitcases with all the jewelry had disappeared. They both look for her desperately, but the hotel owners pretend not to know anything and tell them that they didn't have any suitcases because supposedly they arrived empty-handed. The couple almost fooled the kids, but the owner says too much and tells them to go back to Jeju. That's how they realize that they had stolen their suitcases. But the lady tells them that no one will believe them and that they should leave without making a scene or calling the police. And that will be worse for them. So they resign themselves and wait sitting outside until night falls, and they decide to prevent more people from being robbed. They tell another tenant not to eat anything the lady gave her, because if she does, she'll lose everything. Then they go to the hotel owner's room to try to recover their jewelry. But Wansik was very nervous, and they end up waking up the girl, who screams and wakes up her parents. In the end, the boy escapes, but they had caught Sun, so Wansik has to go back. But since he was an athlete, he lands a solid punch on the owner. As a result, they were taken to the police station, and without any papers, were mistaken for North Korean spies. But before they keep interrogating him, Wansik's mom arrives, and before asking him how he is, she asks about the jewelry he had stolen. He tells her everything that happened. So without hesitation, she goes to the hotel and starts collecting money from the customers. In the end, the girl who owns the hotel gets tired and tells her to leave right away. Then the police arrive and arrest her because she already had 10 reports for theft. After that, the owner of the hotel gives up and returns all her things to Wansik's mother. When they return to the island, Esun ends up being expelled from school, and Wansik is only punished. It's Esun furious. She burns all her books because her dream of becoming a poet had ended. At that time, the rules weren't very fair. Women were punished more harshly because women who run away with a man and don't get married are considered a disgrace. That's why they're marked for life, and it's very hard for them to move forward. Also, Wansik's family didn't want Esun for their only son. A few days later, Esun's uncle had locked her in the storage room and they didn't want to let her out until things calmed down. His mother goes to see her and tells her that she should forget about her son because no one in his family wants her. And if she marries him, his whole family will treat her very badly. But Wansik didn't think that way. He goes to the uncle's house to ask for Esun's hand, but the uncle says no because he can't allow him to take her to a house where she isn't wanted. And also, since her grandmother was a shaman, they were afraid of her. But Wansik replies that he isn't marrying her grandmother, he's marrying her. But Esun again thinks that Wansik pities her, so she tells him that she won't marry him. A few days later, they had arranged a marriage for her with the captain of a fishing boat. He was a man much older than her, but he was willing to marry her because she was very beautiful, and he wanted a pretty and submissive woman to raise his children. Although Esun was very hesitant because he had a very bad temper, but he convinces her with his money because he promises that if she marries him, he will pay for her university studies. He also tells her that no one else will accept her because she ran away with another man. Meanwhile, Wansik didn't know anything about it, but when he hears the ladies talking, he runs after Esun to ask her not to marry that man and to marry him instead. But she once again tells him no, because at least with the captain she'll have a chance, but if she marries him, she won't have anything. So she throws his ring at him and asks him to please leave so she can live her life. The next day, Wansik goes to Busan to become an athlete. Apparently, this was Wansik's mother's plan, because she had convinced Sun to marry someone else, so that her son would forget about her and could become an athlete on the ship. Wansik was very sad and told his coach that he didn't like athletics. He only ran and tried very hard because it was the only way he found to leave the island. He wanted to go to college with Sun, but now that he's leaving without her, he lost all motivation. Meanwhile, Sun was trying on her wedding dress, but the captain kept speaking badly about Wansik and she kept defending him. Then, do you remember what he used to say when they were kids? That when he grew up, he would be her husband? That's why he reacts and wants to follow his heart. So she runs to the port to stop the love of her life from leaving. But when she arrives, it's already too late. Wansik has already set sail. She starts shouting with all her, even though the ship was very far away. Thankfully, Wansik's heart manages to hear her, so without hesitation, he jumps off the ship. He swims with all his strength until he reaches her, because when two people love each other, there is nothing on this earth that can separate them. Time later, they got married, and it turns out that when they went to Busan, she became pregnant. That's when their first daughter was born, and they named her Myung. Because of this, both of them had to give up their dreams to become the parents of their little daughter. But their life wouldn't be easy at all, because ever since they got married, Wansik's mother completely changed. She no longer treated Sun and her well. Sometimes she treated her even worse than the grandmother, who used to be the one who treated her the worst, but now many times she would even take her side. Time later, Esun's stepfather was going to move to the city with his wife and children, but Esun didn't want them to take them away. Her stepfather's wife tells her not to worry. After raising them, they have become her children. So she promises not to treat them badly. In the end, both of them make peace. And she also gives her many things, so she won't arrive home empty-handed. It was a way to show her support, because Esun's family hadn't given her the traditional dowry. But as expected, for Wansik's family, it wasn't enough. Esun tells her husband that she doesn't want her daughter to be a housewife. She wants her to do whatever she wants and to have a better future, so she asks her husband to help her. That's why, the next day, Wansik buys a new tricycle for his daughter so she can play and get out of the kitchen. Also, during lunch, she turns around to eat with her family. This makes her grandmother furious, but her wife was very happy. Unfortunately, her happiness doesn't last long because the grandmother had decided to make her great-granddaughter a diver and wanted to. She wanted Esun's late mother to give her blessing. She was a very old-fashioned woman and didn't believe that her granddaughter could study or do anything else with her life. Esun didn't want her daughter to end up like her mother, since she had always forbidden her to become a diver because women who dive live shorter lives than the rest. For that reason, Esun gathers her courage and takes her daughter, and for the first time confronts Wansik's family. But before things get worse, her husband arrives and takes Esun's side. He tells them that she married him, not his family, so he takes his wife and daughter with him. They moved to an old house, and the female divers had gone with him, so they wouldn't go hungry. All their friends and acquaintances had joined forces to help the young couple. Became pregnant again, and everyone was very happy, especially her. because she felt that things were finally settling down. But her mother's friends tell her that her husband is having a hard time because he works with the captain, who was supposed to be her husband. That's why he always treated him badly. He felt Esun had been stolen from him. One night she saw all the signs that showed what her daughter was going through, signs of all the effort she made to keep her family safe. That's why she went to talk to the captain's wife to ask her not to treat Wansik so badly anymore. But she tells her that things are worse than she thought, because the captain did everything he could to mistreat her husband. He also paid him less than the others and made him work more. When Esun hears this, she runs to the port, only to see the captain mistreating her husband. So she runs after him to tell him that he can't do that anymore, because from now on, Wansik no longer works for him. Both of them go home very discouraged, but at the same time they feel a great sense of relief. Although later things get even more complicated because the captain's family owned all the boats on the island, and they weren't going to give him a job as a fisherman. As the days went by, Wansik looked for work all over the island, but no one wanted to hire him. This made him very depressed because he wasn't able to provide food for his family. And with each passing day, things got worse. They had less and less food. That's why Esun had to change. She learned the hard way that sometimes you have to swallow your pride. That's why he went to his grandmother, but she told him she couldn't help him, even though that was a lie, because in the early morning she goes to see her and gives her life savings. Esun didn't want to accept them, but her grandmother tells her that she must because she made a promise to her mother that she would help her when she needed it most. Because she knew her daughter very well, she knew she would never ask for help unless she had no other choice. With the money she gave her, she bought a boat and all her friends and family throw a big party. His mother and grandmother were very happy, and for the first time, they blessed her marriage. The grandmother loved Esun more than her daughter-in-law because she had given her grandson a great dowry. Everyone was happy because the young couple was about to get married soon. But in the middle of the celebration, her water broke, so they quickly took her to the hospital. Time later, the couple was happier than ever. Wansik's mother could no longer hate Esun, even if she wanted to, because she had only brought blessings to her son. At night, Wansik says goodbye to the old man who rented him a room, because now he would have his own house. After many years and so much hardship, they finally have their own house, and not just any house, but the house where Sun's mother lived and where all her childhood memories were. The night they moved in, Esun's mother came to visit her in her dreams and told her that she was very happy. But that wasn't all, because the neighbor had a truck. When she woke up, she called the neighbor because she needed his truck to go to the hospital, since she was about to give birth again. Her third child was a boy, and the grandmother was very happy. She said he was blessed and that he would bring good fortune. His mother could no longer say anything against her daughter-in-law, but she still didn't like her. Sometime later, the captain was running to be the head of the village, and one of the ladies suggested that Esun should be the deputy chief. But the captain mocked them and told them that was not a position for a woman. Esun gets upset and tells him that if he doesn't accept, then she'll run to be the head of the village herself. In the end, the captain is afraid of losing and agrees to let her be the deputy chief. One day, while they were shutting down an illegal nightclub, the captain asks Esun if she regrets not marrying him. She just looks at him and covers her nose. When she enters the bathroom, she finds the captain's wife with her little daughter, but instead of turning her in, she helps her escape. She knew the captain would beat her if he found her in that place. When she's safe, she confesses to Esun that she regrets getting married. She would have preferred to marry a man like Wansik because he is very loving and never treats her badly. When leaving, she asks her daughter to never settle and to marry a man like Esun's husband. At night, they were painting the boat and Wansik asked his wife to help him, but she didn't want to do it, because in their traditions, a woman cannot get on a boat. If she does, the sea god would get angry. But her daughter wanted to get on, and Esun couldn't say no to her. So she decided to break with her superstitions. When they set sail, she vents her anger at the sea god, saying she no longer believes in such things and only trusts the love she feels for her family. At that moment, they both felt completely happy, but nothing lasts forever. Sometime later, a typhoon approaches the island, and when everyone should be taking shelter, Myung had suffered an accident. When he finds out, he goes to look for her, but not before telling the neighbor to watch his children. But the neighbor was asleep and hadn't heard him. When he finds his daughter, she was completely safe. She had just fallen off her bicycle. But when he returned home, he couldn't find either of his two children. Luckily, one of the ladies found the older son, but the younger one was nowhere to be found. Desperate, she goes out to look for him. When her husband finds out, he drops what he was doing and asks the whole town for help. Everyone starts mobilizing. Eventually, they manage to find him and her. The poor boy was lifeless. His parents and the whole town were devastated. And Wansik, who was stronger than steel, for the first time was the one who cried the most. After burying him, both of them were dead inside. They didn't eat, they didn't talk, they did nothing but cry. After 3 days, Esun's mother visited her in her dreams. And she tells her that it's in those difficult moments when she must fight the hardest, because if she stays still, she'll be dragged away by the sea. She must fight with all her strength to move forward. So she gets up and goes to her son, who was also very sad because he thought his mother was angry with him. He blamed himself for leaving his little brother alone, but Esun comforts him and tells him it's not his fault. For his part, Wansik also gets up because he saw that his daughter's backpack was torn. When he asks her why she didn't ask for another one, she starts to cry and tells him that everything is her fault. If she hadn't gone out to ride her bike, her little brother would still be alive. Her father hugs her and tells her not to blame herself anymore. The next day, both of them got up because they still had 2 children to raise. Wansik went to work early and Esun went out to sell things. In the afternoon, while they were returning home, Esun said that she hates the sea god, but her husband asked her to push herself to get through this hard time. Otherwise, their children won't be able to be happy. But she couldn't stop blaming herself, because she had told her son that if he waits for his father at the seashore, he will come no matter what happens. Because of this, Wansik also blames himself for not arriving in time to save his son. Fortunately, with the village's help, they managed to carry on, since many of them helped them and didn't let them fall apart. The years went by like that until Myung was in his last year of school, and soon she would be going to college. She was just like her mother when she was her age. She was also very diligent in school, and she had been accepted to college. On her graduation day, a kind boy approached the family and offered to take a picture of them. His name is Byom, and he was madly in love with Myung. Her father was furious because the boy was too obvious. At night, we see that they were a couple, and their relationship was very similar to Esun and Wansik's when they were young. Sometime later, Myung had left, and soon the elections would be held. The aunts tell Esun to run to be the next head of the village. She says no. Wansik was already campaigning for his wife. For his part, the captain was also campaigning, but since he had more money, he bought more things. And he also spoke very badly about Esun and her family. He said she was an indecent woman because she ran away with Wansik before she turned 18. Also, her second son was a juvenile delinquent because he made illegal bets and was involved in shady business at school. His teachers were fed up with him. Esun felt very ashamed because of that. She didn't understand why her oldest daughter was excellent and he was so problematic. For her part, Myung wasn't having such a good time either because her friends at university envied her, and to make them angry, she would always leave with a very handsome man in a very nice car. Her classmates even started to think that maybe she was an escort, but the truth was that she was the private tutor of a rich girl. That's why the handsome driver always came to pick her up. But soon, things would get even worse because her student's mother asks her to take the exam instead of her daughter. She chose her only because she looks like her daughter, not because she's a good tutor. In exchange, she will give her an apartment near the university. But doing that was illegal, and if she gets caught, she would never be able to finish her studies. That's why she prefers not to take the risk, because she didn't want to disappoint her mother. Since going to university wasn't just her dream, but also her mother's, that's why the furious lady decides to report her and accuses her of stealing her ring. The police arrest her, but she acts just like her mother did when she was arrested. The officers ask her to call her parents, but she refuses to do so, because if they found out, they might pay for the ring, and that was very expensive. Besides, she hadn't stolen anything. Luckily for her, the cleaning lady takes the ring and pretends she found it. She tells the lady that she can now go and withdraw the complaint, but she, furious, tells her not to meddle in her business, so she threatens to throw the ring away if she doesn't withdraw the complaint. And it turns out that the cleaning lady was the woman that Esun and Wansik saved at that hotel. She helped her because she looked just like her mother and wanted to return the favor. At the same time, Captain was campaigning in the village, but he just kept talking badly about Esun. The ladies wanted her to do the same, because Captain had a lot of things to hide, but she didn't want to do that. She wanted to win fair and square. But before going back home, they discover Captain caressing another woman's legs. The ladies make fun of him because that woman has a husband and he will beat him up when he finds out. So to keep him quiet, they ask him to give up being the next village chief. Days later, Esun becomes the first female chief of the village. Everyone was happy and they throw a big party. Besides, Esun felt fulfilled because she finally kept the promise she made to her mother. Wansik, for his part, was also happy because now he was the first gentleman. The one who wasn't happy was the captain's wife. Even though he was a bad person and treated her badly, she stayed with him all these years. The next day, Esun thanks her mother's friends for supporting her all these years. She also asks her mother to visit her again to congratulate her. At the same time, Wansik had gone to visit his daughter, but before meeting her, he ran into her ex-boyfriend. He calls him father-in-law, and Wansik goes crazy. He tells him not to call him that again and to stay away from his daughter, but he tells him that she has already broken up with him 8 times. But even so, she keeps coming back to him. Wansik relates to him because that boy is just like he was at that age. That's why he hates him even more, because he knows his daughter could fall in love with him. At night, Myung still hadn't arrived at her stop because there was a protest that day. But her father had been waiting for her all that time. He didn't leave until he could see his daughter. This made Myung feel bad for him. But since she couldn't express herself, she gets upset with her father. Then they go out to eat. And she tells him that she's tired of being poor. She wants to go study abroad and do many things that require a lot of money. Wansik tells her to do everything she wants because her father will support her no matter what. Myung felt very guilty because her parents sacrificed a lot for her. They paid for her college. And that's why she didn't want to make them spend more. When it's time to leave, Myung says goodbye to him for the first time. After many years, Wansik feels very happy because his daughter says goodbye to him, just like when she was a child. A few days later, Esun had to go to the school to apologize to the teachers because of the mischief her son caused. Without realizing it, her son was becoming a freeloader, just like his cousin. Meanwhile, Myung gets back together with Byum. But since he had to return to the army, he asks her to marry him. She tells him she won't know until the day comes. So before he leaves, he promises her that he will see her in her wedding dress. Back on the island, Esun remembers her high school days when she wrote a poem for a literature contest. 20 years later, she was at the same festival. But this time, she was selling fish. Then, one of her former classmates arrives. When she talks to her, she feels sad. But not for herself, but for her 3-year-old son, because to her, her late son never grew up. He would always be 3 years old. On the other hand, for Wansik, his son did grow up. And every time she saw boys his age, she always gave them gifts. Sometime later, the ladies decided to open a store together because they were tired of selling on the street. They wanted to retire in their own store. And even though Esun didn't have any money, they decided to include her. One day, her daughter calls her and she confesses that she wants to study abroad and her teacher was willing to help her. But her mother preferred to sell everything to send her abroad herself. But Myung tells her not to do it and instead use that money to retire. In the end, she gets upset with her mother, and even though she didn't have any money, she helps a lady who was selling on the street. Both Esun and her daughter were very much alike, even though they were almost always fighting. That's why, without telling Myung, they sell their house, and they move to a small apartment. But on their last night, Esun's mother visits her once again. She tells her not to worry about her son. She will welcome him if he ever comes back home. When Myung goes abroad, her mother cries inconsolably because her parents gave up everything they had just to make her dream come true. But Esun wasn't sad. On the contrary, she was very happy because they weren't just her daughter's dreams, but also her own, and her mother's as well. On the other hand, the ladies had submitted the poem that Esun wrote, and the most surprising thing is that she ended up winning. But since she wasn't a student, no one knew who she was. A few days later, they have to remodel the apartment because it was quite old. Seeing his wife feeling down, Wansik tells her that she should have married a rich man so she wouldn't have to suffer so much with him. But she answers that she doesn't need that, because everyone is jealous of her. As the days went by, Myung felt very sad, because her parents did everything possible to give her a better future. That's why she studied and worked harder, because she didn't want to depend on them so much anymore. Since she was about to graduate, she wanted to start helping them, or at least keep them from spending so much. So she moved to a house farther from the university just because it was the cheapest she could find, but the landlord wasn't very nice. He threatened to kick her out if he caught her with a boyfriend. This was because his oldest daughter used to do that. She always brought her boyfriends home, and one day, while Myung was cleaning, the landlord arrived and his daughter was with her boyfriend. The scared girl asks her to hide him in her room. In the end, she agrees, but the landlord already knew all the tricks and finds the boy in the closet. As for Wansik, he also finds a girl in his son's closet. He goes crazy when his son tells him she's his girlfriend, but he quickly calms down when he sees how his son defends her, just like he used to defend Sun when he was that age. Besides, she was the captain's daughter. Her name was Hyunseok. They had practically been born together and had known each other their whole lives. But the one who was happy about that relationship was Wansik's mother, because now Sun knows what it feels like. He finally knows what she felt when a girl stole her only son time went by like that. And now, Myung needed to get a job, even though he studied abroad. He wasn't flooded with job offers, so he ended up working at a movie theater. But that was good, because when there was an empty theater, he took the opportunity to meet up with his boyfriend, who had already finished his military service. And now they wanted to take the next step, that is, to make their relationship official. But when Myung walks her home, he tells her to move in with him, because the place where she lives seemed dangerous, and Myung didn't want his girlfriend to stay there. She gets upset and asks him to leave, because she didn't like being looked at with pity. The next night, the owner of the theater asked Myung to take some dumplings to Chan. But when he was about to give them to him, Chan was fighting with his girlfriend. She was asking him to find another job and to finally give up on art, because she couldn't take it anymore, being with someone as poor as him. Chan tells her to marry another man, someone who has money, but she kept holding on to him, even though she had already been on 6 blind dates. Outraged, she asks him if he already has someone else. And at that moment, she discovers Myung. She tells her it's not what it looks like, but the girl doesn't believe her and tells them to be happy together, because they're both on the same level. Meanwhile, in Jeju, we see that the captain was upset because his daughter was dating Sung's son. That's why he wanted to punish her. But no one in his house paid attention to him. Even his own children preferred their stepmother over him. Because of all this, Jang Myung wanted to break up with his girlfriend, but she tells him that he can't leave her. If he does, she'll hit any woman who gets close to him, and she'll never leave him alone. But he still wants to leave her because Hyunsuk's brother had beaten him up and told him he'd hit him again. Every day he kept seeing her. Back to Myung, she had already made her relationship with her boyfriend official. But the boy's mother didn't like her. On the contrary, she hated her, and every time she saw her, she treated her badly. She felt Myung wasn't good enough for her son and didn't want him to date her. So she warns her that she doesn't want to see her again. Myung was upset and didn't want to be humiliated anymore. So she warns her boyfriend that he has to choose between being a good boyfriend or being a good son, because he can't be both. The next day at work, Myung notices that a woman is making the customers uncomfortable. Everyone thought she was a scammer, but she was only asking the customers to admire the painting from the movie, because if not, it would be a waste of talent and effort. And whenever there was a premiere, she would go to the theater to ask everyone in line to take a moment to appreciate her son's art. When Myung told the theater owner, he was moved and gave her tickets. He also told her that without her son's talent, the theater would be ruined. Chang thanks Myung for telling the owner, since he could never have done it himself. Thanks to that, his mother was able to go to the movies for the first time. After leaving work, the three of them go together. Because the lady was very grateful. Then they go to eat noodles as a reward for what he did for his mother. Meanwhile, in Jeju, Esun was upset because her son kept getting into more and more trouble. But her friends tell her that instead of punishing him, she should talk to him and finally ask him why he does what he does. At night, Sun goes to visit his grandmother. Soon it would be the anniversary of his father's death. And while he was talking with his aunt, he remembers that around that time, his mother saved her from being kidnapped by a child snatcher. Those people would take children to make them beggars. Luckily one day, she found her again, and she gave him a good beating. Also, the whole market joined together to drive them out of the town. A few days later, Sun had a bad dream. So worried, she calls her daughter and asks how she is. Myung tells her that she's fine and that she shouldn't believe in superstitions. But at that moment, she had another nightmare. She dreamed about her little son. He had come to warn her that his older sister was in danger, so she couldn't take it anymore, and went to the city to look for her daughter. When she arrived, her daughter was unconscious. There was a leak in the wall, and her room had filled with carbon monoxide. And since it was cold, she had the windows closed. That's why she got poisoned. Her desperate mother started shouting for help. Luckily, Chang was in the other room with his girlfriend's father, so he quickly called an ambulance. That's how, once again, Sun saved her daughter, but this time, it was with the help of her little son, because he knew that Sun wouldn't be able to bear losing another one of her children. Luckily, it wasn't that serious, and Myung would recover soon. But at that moment, Byum arrives and tells her that they should just get married already so they can live together and not go through things like this again, because if she were to die, he wouldn't be able to bear it. And he would also die with her. Her mother hears everything, and her reaction reminds her a lot of Wansik when he was young, because he said the same thing to her about getting married. He told her to marry him, not his family. Even so, Myung knows that her boyfriend will never be able to distance himself from his mother because he was an only child. But after hearing all that, Sun gets upset because she thinks the groom's mother treated her daughter badly. But before she can say anything, Chang comes in, and the nurses tell her that he is Myung's guardian because he carried her to the ambulance. The nurses say he's Myung's guardian since he carried her to the ambulance. Byum gets upset and asks his girlfriend about it, but Sun interrupts, saying it's not the right place. Meanwhile in Jeju, Esun and his girlfriend had come back, but the aunts tell them they look like Romeo and Juliet. They also tell them that their parents were going to get married, and they could have been siblings. This makes Jangmyeon feel strange. That's why when he sees his father, he thinks that he doesn't know anything, and he didn't want to break his heart. So he enlisted in the army to avoid seeing him anymore. At the same time, Chang quit his job and also enlisted in the army. He did it without telling anyone. He just left a note with me, and he also made a painting as a keepsake for Myung. From that time, they went to eat noodles. She feels very alive, but she was still sad because she thought they were friends. But he left without saying goodbye. And since he was going to move away and also leave his job, she thought she would never see him again. Sometime later, Esun had gotten engaged to Byum and they were going to get married soon. Wansik was against it, but Esun supported her daughter because she knew that she was very much in love. But at the engagement dinner, the groom's parents arrived late. On top of that, they treated Myung very badly, just like Wansik's family treated Esun, or even worse, because they hadn't raised their daughter to be just a simple housewife. But she put up with it, and she asked her parents not to make a scene. But the groom's parents wouldn't cooperate. They wanted to control everything. They wanted Myung to do as she was told without complaining. They even wanted the wedding to be wherever they decided, even though Myung wanted to get married on Jeju Island. But Byum's mother overruled everyone, and her opinion was the only one that seemed to matter. Since she had money, she thought she could look down on her daughter-in-law's parents. And since they loved their daughter very much, they had to give in. When they finished eating, Wansik and Esun were devastated because they felt bad that the groom's family looked down on their daughter just because they didn't have money. Myung knew how her parents felt, and she felt really bad because she truly wanted to marry her boyfriend. Then the day came when they had to choose the dress. Myung was furious with her mother because she had arrived late and didn't want to keep her mother-in-law waiting. But when Esun arrived, she also wanted to please the groom's mother, which is why she didn't want to choose flashy fabric. But her daughter knew her tastes and knew that she liked her clothes to have flowers. Her mother-in-law told her no, to use something simple and not too flashy, because not only her guests will come, but so will hers. and she doesn't want to be embarrassed. And to top it off, she chooses the color of the dress. But later, both mothers sat down to talk. Sun wanted to fix things so that Byom's mother would accept her daughter. But she replied that she never would, because her daughter is not good enough for her treasure. So she asked her to do whatever she can to cancel the wedding. Otherwise, she will make her beloved daughter's life miserable. Sun knew her daughter very well, and she knew how stubborn she could be. But she felt that once again she had to save her. So she asks her to make the right decision. A few days later, Byom wanted to move far away from her mother, but she, furious, once again lashed out at Myung. She blamed her for everything bad. She also accused her mother of wanting to marry her off to her son just for convenience. Through all this, Byom couldn't do anything. His mother simply wouldn't listen to him. She told him that she is his mother and that she only wants what's best for him. In the end, Myung finally understands. If she doesn't put a stop to her mother-in-law, not only will she get hurt, but her parents will too. And they will probably suffer even more. So she cancels the wedding. She apologizes to her boyfriend and leaves. As she walks away, she cries uncontrollably. And on that very day, the North Korean leader had died. So the taxi driver thinks she's a North Korean spy. Days later, he goes looking for her again. He didn't want to give up without at least trying. He tells her he'll cut off his mother if needed. But she knows that if he does that, at some point in his life, he'll feel bad and blame her for it. She was really in love, but she loved herself more. Over time, he understood it too. Here we make a time jump, and we see that many years later, Byung's mother got what she wanted. But that didn't make her happy because her son started drinking a lot. And one day she remembered Sun's words. He told her that if she managed to separate them, the one who would suffer the most would be her own son. And in the end, he was right, because he married a woman his mother approved of. But on his wedding day, the lady was the only one smiling. Her son could never forgive her for keeping him away from the love of his life. Back in the story, more than a year had already passed since Byung broke up with her boyfriend. But she still felt really bad. That's why she got depressed and went back home to her parents. But they didn't know anything about that, and they didn't care either. They were very happy to have their daughter back. They both spoiled her and treated her like a queen. She didn't complain to them or anything because she knew they did it with a lot of love. Besides, she didn't visit them very often. Early in the morning, Wansik wakes his daughter up. He wanted her to go with him to the sea to watch the sunrise together, even though she didn't want to. In the end, she can't say no to her father. When they arrive, she thanks him for caring so much about her and for being such a good father. But she asks him not to try so hard anymore and to care more about himself. Wansik tells her that he will never be able to stop worrying about his children. When they returned to land, the captain was there, and seeing how happy they were, he started yelling at them because deep down he felt very envious. Because his relationship with his children was very bad. Not even his own children loved him. They preferred their stepmother over him. At night, Sun wanted his daughter to go on blind dates so she could finally get over her ex-boyfriend. But she didn't want to do it because the whole town might say she's a slut. But the truth is that almost no one knew she was going to get married because her mother didn't send out the invitations. She knew that sooner or later her daughter would react because she raised her differently. So she would do what she wanted and not submit to anyone. When she returned to Busan, Myung was no longer sad. She had decided to move on with her life. For their part, her parents felt sad that their daughter had left. But that's life. Children have to leave the nest and fly on their own. The next day, Wansik's younger sister goes to visit Sun, but it was only to ask her for money because her life didn't turn out as she expected. She had a lot of debts, and every time she visited Sun, it was to get money from her. Even so, she was still her sister-in-law, and Sun always tried to support her. As for Wansik, he had gone to visit his mother. She was taking care of her grandson, but since she was older, it was very difficult for her. Even so, she had no other choice. Sun's grandmother was very old, and that day she was celebrating her birthday. Everyone thought she was already senile, but when she saw Sun, she starts to speak for the first time in a long time. Her mind becomes clear when she hears her granddaughter's voice. That's why she asks her to come live at her house. But the grandmother says she doesn't want to, because she wants to die in her own house. She also starts to remember her beautiful moments with her granddaughter. And her mind becomes clear again for the last time before leaving this world. She also says goodbye to her son and tells him that tonight she will sleep very well on the mattress her granddaughter bought her. When Sun's mother comes to pick her up, the grandmother says she hopes she has paid her debt. At her grave, Sun begins to see how fleeting life is. With each passing season, they lose a loved one. She confesses to her husband that her wish is for both of them to live together. Time later, her son finished his military service, but he didn't come home alone. He brought his girlfriend with him. She would soon be the mother of his child, which meant they would become grandparents. But they didn't like this news at all. As for Chang, he had also finished his military service, and when he got off the bus, he saw Myung. He hadn't been able to confess his feelings to her, so he ran after the bus. He didn't want to miss this chance. But unfortunately for him, he didn't catch up to her. Sometime later, Myung's son was born, and the only ones who celebrated were the father's family, because Hyun-suk's family, they didn't want anything to do with her. They had practically abandoned her. But Yeon-myung's parents tampoco estaban muy contentos que digamos. They weren't exactly happy either, because their son was still very young. He didn't have a job or any way to support his family. That's why they were very worried. But he tells them that he already has a great idea. His father tells him not to do it, especially not with his so-called friend. But his son tells him not to interfere, because he's not like his father. He will succeed in life. He won't make his children go through hardships like he did. His mother scolds them for saying such harsh things to his father. Then Hyun-suk's mother arrives. She was very embarrassed because her family had turned their back on her daughter. She also wanted her to get married before becoming a mother. She didn't want her to end up like her. Esun tells her that her son still doesn't have money, and to have a little patience with him. But she replies that she likes her son-in-law even if he doesn't have money, because he reminds her a lot of Wansik, and everyone knows how he treats his wife. That's why she's sure her daughter chose a good man. That's why Myung was upset with her sister. She hadn't gone to see her nephew, but it wasn't because of that. It was because the country was facing a serious crisis, and her sister had to find a new job, because her company had gone bankrupt. Due to the crisis, there were more employees than jobs, and it was very hard for everyone. One day, while she was coming back from a job interview, she arrived at the old cinema where she used to work. Since she had nothing else to do, she went to see a movie. Chan was sitting in the same row. It seemed like fate wanted to bring them together again. But when he realized it, Myung had already left. But this time, Chan was not going to give up. So he started to chase after her. But once again, the bus didn't stop. Once more, it seemed like he was going to lose her. But Chan would not leave his life in the hands of fate. So he ran until he caught up with the bus. Then he waited patiently for her to reach her stop. When they see each other, he tells her that he's been chasing after her since the cinema. She blushes and tells him that he doesn't look like a Picasso anymore. Now he even looks clean. He says that he still dedicates himself to art, but now he teaches it. Also, it wasn't a coincidence that they met again. He went to the cinema every day because he had hope that someday she would come back. After having a few drinks, she accidentally drops her glass, and he kindly cleans everything up. She tells him that he acts like a father, and he replies that he just wants to take care of her. That's how it begins, their love story. They got along very well because they had the same love language. That's why the time came to take the next step. She took him to meet her father, but Chan was not a man of the sea, and he got very seasick on the boat. Wansik tells him that if he acts like that, he'll never be able to entrust his daughter to him. At night, things got even more uncomfortable. Wansik was very tough on his son-in-law, and he was very nervous because he wanted to make a good impression. But deep down, Wansik had already accepted him because he had told him that he only wanted to protect his daughter. Even if he was wrong, he thought of her first. As for Sun, she knew that he was just like her husband, so she wasn't worried. Besides, Chang's family had already accepted Kumyeon, and that gave her a lot of peace, because that way, no one would treat her daughter badly. Chang's mother was very kind and loved her like a daughter. Sometime later, the young couple was going to get married. Yeon asked her mother not to cry, but the one who was really crying was her younger brother. When they arrived at the church, her ex-boyfriend was also there. He had gone there to keep his promise. He wanted to see her in her wedding dress, but he didn't dare to talk to her before she walked down the aisle. Yeon remembers her first love and feels a little strange because she always thought she would marry him, but she was grateful. that fate brought her Prince Charming to her. Before walking down the aisle, she asks her father not to cry because if he does, she will cry too. But he tells her that if at any moment she ever regrets it, she can always come back home. When she hears that, his daughter is the one who starts to cry because she remembers all the moments when her father had told her that he would always support her whenever she needed him. When he gives her away to her husband, he watches his daughter grow from a little girl into a woman. This brings tears to his eyes and his daughter starts crying even more. When the wedding ends, the family's happiness fades away because his son is accused of theft and his big business idea was to open a pawn shop. But his friend stole all the valuable things and ran away forever. And the only one left was Myung, so he had to take all the blame. His parents tell him over and over again, "I told you so." He answers them that they shouldn't scold him anymore and to let him serve his sentence. But they were his parents and they could never abandon their son. Even though Son blamed himself because he felt he had caused him trauma and inferiority complexes. That's why his son felt he had to earn a lot of money because he couldn't compete with his brother at school. So at least he wanted to be successful. He wanted his mother to be proud of him, just like she was. Later, he could pay his boyfriend's bail, but he refused to do it. She tells him to leave right now and that she won't give him a single cent. And he replies that that's why nobody loves him. His son's debt, that's how he gets a television. And over time, she would choose him again. When she returned home, her son and his family were living with them. ES son was very strict with her son and this really bothered the mother. And she tells her that it was very easy to turn around and bring her son-in-law back again. When he gets off the boat, his father tells him that being a fisherman is very dangerous. He answers that he wants to be just like him, that he has a debt, and he wanted to buy him another boat. When his mother arrives, she apologizes to her son because she felt that everything was her fault. She promises to cook him chulas. Take good care of your father. They always told him that Wansik didn't deserve to have a son like him. The years went by like that until opportunities came. For example, the captain's wife, she passed her exam to create an opportunity, and that she becomes a poet for a better future for him and his family. A few days later, their daughter goes to visit them. But she notices that something is very strange, and she thinks that her husband lost his job, and that he is going through a tough time. After insisting, Gumiho tells her that he quit his job, and that he is going through some hard times. Then her brother arrives, and he had hurt his fingers while working. This makes her mother even more worried, because her daughter was getting older and still didn't have children. But Gumiho tells her that she will have children. She was proud of Wansik. Then he tries to apologize to her for having treated her so badly at the beginning. She tells him that now she understands him a little, but he wasn't that bad because she never judged her or blamed her for leaving him just when the captain wanted to change and have a better marriage. He asks her to ride a bike and do more things together as a couple, but she tells him it's already too late. The little affection she had for him disappeared when he refused to help their daughter. The captain tries to keep her, but deep down, he knew how much his wife had suffered. So in the end, he signs the divorce papers, because if it doesn't work out, he would lose the little they have left. Even so, he was willing to make it work, because he was tired of being a loser. He wanted to have money to help his children and spoil his grandchildren. But once again, if he didn't pay the bank debt, he would lose his house. Esun was upset and yelled at his father for having gambled everything. But in the end, the one who ends up saving them is his eldest daughter. She got the money, and now they could be at ease. Their mother was upset because that money had been borrowed. Even so, her daughter tells her that she is the pillar of that family, and that she did it because she feels guilty for having made them spend so much. She didn't want to carry so much responsibility, and she blames her mother for putting all that weight on her. But then her father comes out and yells at her for the first time. She starts crying, and when she leaves, her mother doesn't understand why she's in such a bad mood. But when she goes to the kitchen, she finally understands. Her daughter was pregnant. This makes her parents feel really bad for having fought with her. Time later, her oldest daughter was about to give birth, but the doctors tell her husband that things are very complicated. He asks them to prioritize his wife's life over that of his son. But her labor kept getting worse. Then he calls his in-laws, and he explains to them what is happening. They hurried to go to the hospital, but Gumyeon had a really tough delivery. Thankfully, her baby was born healthy, but her husband was so scared that he told her he didn't want to have any more children. On the other hand, now understood her mother. And she realized how hard it was for her, because she had her when she was only 18 years old, so she promised herself to treat her better. Besides, her dad had a new dream. He wanted to be the rich grandfather, so he could spoil his granddaughter. That's why he bought her expensive clothes. Sometime later, they had to make a decision: to keep the restaurant or to sell it. Wansik was determined to make it work, so they got to work. Together with his son, they went out to hand out flyers. And they had decided to deliver food to homes. The first few months were very tough. But when the World Cup started, their business was a sensation. Everyone was ordering their food. Also, the boss from Squid Game had gone to their store. That made it very popular among young people. And things kept getting better, because they also caught the thief who ran off with the union's stuff. They were so expensive that he couldn't sell them. In the end, he posted them online. That's how they caught him. But it was partly because the captain did have a heart after all, and paid the police inspector, so that he would catch him no matter what it cost. Sometime later, a very famous actress went to eat at the restaurant and they gave the restaurant free publicity. It turns out that Wansik had saved her life. It turns out that Wansik had saved her life many years ago when she was involved in a big scandal and wanted to end her life because of it. He saved her, and many years later, she came back to thank him, and this was her way of showing gratitude. Afterwards, Eun and his girlfriend finally got married. After the ceremony, the captain tells Wansik that he has nice shoes. He lends them to him, and the captain likes them a lot. Then he confesses that he envies him, because his family loves him very much. On the other hand, nobody loves him. He always thought that giving them money was enough, but he forgot about the most important thing. He had to give them love. Upon hearing this, Wansik invites him to his restaurant, not out of pity, but because he wanted advice on how to make more money. As time went by, and with a lot of hard work, the restaurant became a real success. They were always full. They even had people waiting for a table. Besides, the captain had changed. Now, he was more affectionate and kind, especially with his little granddaughter. Because of the great success of the place, Esun was very happy. As if by magic, he looked about 20 years younger. Sometime later, her daughter calls her and desperately asks for help because she couldn't handle her own daughter anymore. But Esun, as always, did more than he asked. Then he asks her how she managed to raise 2 children, because she can't handle even one. Her mother advises her to do whatever she wants and live her own life. That way, she won't have regrets and she'll be a better mother. Then she talks to her daughter, and her daughter tells her that she behaves badly, to spend more time with her mother. When she hears that, she apologizes for yelling at her so much. After that, she arranges a medical checkup for her parents because she knew that if she didn't take them, they would never go on their own. At that moment, her father receives a call. And now that he had money and free time, Wansik, for the first time in more than 20 years, he finally had a hobby. After the checkups, Wansik talks in his sleep and repeats the name of his late son over and over again. After so many years, he still hasn't forgiven himself for not being able to save his son. All these years, he always visited his grave on his birthday. When he returned home, Wansik knew that his wife was writing poems, and every night he would ask her to read him one. But once again, tragedy knocks on their door. When everything seemed to be fine, their daughter calls them and gives them the terrible news that her father had cancer. His illness had progressed a lot, and the odds were pretty slim. Even so, he started treatment. But as time went by, Wansik walked more and more slowly. It became harder for him to climb the stairs. So many years of hard work were taking their toll. Even so, he took the time to be romantic with his wife. She promises him they'll go see the autumn flowers when he gets better. He tells her she's annoying, but even so, he promises not to leave her alone. In the hospital, since they were older, they didn't know what to do, and the staff always ended up scolding Esun. This really upsets her husband. and he yells at everyone for treating her badly. He tells them they should be kinder because he saw an old woman alone and thought that when he dies, no one will be able to defend his wife. As the final treatment approaches, he asks his daughter to stay so they can talk a little. She agrees, and they didn't sleep all night. Wansik told her his whole story, and his daughter felt truly moved. In the end, her father asks her, no matter what happens, not to leave her mother alone. She tells him she won't, because she felt like he was saying goodbye. But Wansik knew his time was running out. His daughter cries inconsolably and asks for forgiveness 100 times. He tells her not to worry, because he had the best daughter in the world. When they returned home, everyone knew the bad news. His cancer hadn't been cured. His son was devastated. He tries to hold back his tears, but he can't. He tells his father to forgive him for being such a bad son and begs him to stay with them a little longer. He doesn't want him to go. When things are finally getting better, he wants to buy him a Mercedes and give him his boat back. He doesn't want him to go without paying him back a little of what he owes. His whole family was in a bad place, but his daughter wanted to make him happy. Her company was a success, and while she was giving her speech, she expresses her gratitude and pride towards her parents, who were the ones that encouraged her to start her business. Wansik and Esun were really happy. But that wasn't all. They had promoted the creation of a museum in honor of the women divers of Jeju Island. They wanted to show the whole world the legacy of the women divers. Despite her illness, Wansik lived long enough to see her son fight with her grandson. They also had one last surprise for her. Esun had written 100 poems and a publishing house. They had agreed to publish her book. Wansik was really happy because finally he could say that he had fulfilled his promise to make Esun a poet. Both of them wanted that moment to last forever because they were completely happy, but nothing lasts forever. When going to bed, Wansik talks to his wife as if he were saying goodbye. He asks heaven to give him the joy of meeting her in his next life. He also asks her that when he dies, she shouldn't cry too much and should agree to go live with one of their children. He tells her that his last wish is to see her smile before leaving this world. That way, he can go peacefully. A few days later, Wansik becomes very ill. But heaven was merciful and allowed him to see his children one last time. In the end, his wife fulfills his wish, and she says goodbye to him with a smile. After the funeral, Wansik had left everything prepared. Not even in his last days did he stop working. He had a savings account with the money his daughter sent him. He was simply happy with the fact that they remembered him. That's why he didn't spend a single cent. He also bought the Mercedes that his son wanted so much. But the one who received the most gifts was his beloved wife. He fixed up the whole house for her, so she wouldn't miss him so much. The years went by like that, and Esun had continued with her life. Although whenever she could, she would go visit her husband. Also, so she wouldn't forget to remember her wonderful story, she wrote a book, and her daughter sent it to a publisher to have it published. The person who received it was Esun's mother. She had reincarnated, and when she read her daughter's story, she was very proud. As for Esun, she had fulfilled another one of her dreams. She became a teacher at 60 years old. She taught elderly, illiterate women how to read and write, because they'd always felt bad about it. But Teacher Yoon helped them stop feeling ashamed. Esun, ya no tenían vergüenza. It filled her with joy, and from time to time, she would go to the sea to tell her mother about it. Sometime later, her children come to visit her. When they arrive, she is very happy. She also receives copies of her new book. So now, she has also become a famous author. Her children tell her that their father must be very happy. Then her daughter asks her what she wants to do to celebrate the publication of her new book. She says she just wants her to visit more often. Gumiho asks her to come live with her, but her mother says that she can't abandon the elderly women at the nursing home. Despite their age, they are also looking for their place in the world, and they don't want to be treated like a burden. Because it doesn't matter how old you are. If you truly live, you learn about life. As long as you don't give up, you can achieve all your dreams. In the final moments, Esun says goodbye to the love of his life and hopes that someday fate will bring them together again. In the end, we see that Wansik He had waited for his beloved wife all these years until they were finally able to meet again in the next life, just like when they were children. He couldn't leave her alone. Before we finish, remember not to be too hard on your parents because they are also living for the first time. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. Truly, I hope you enjoyed the summary, and I'll see you in the next story.